And we're back, Stripe Show podcast on what day is it? Wednesday. Yeah, how about that? Wednesday, the day before PGA Tour gets started up in Detroit as it rolls on. Rocket Mortgage Classic. For those watching on video on YouTube, you'll see a club fitting going on right now behind me. Don't worry about that. He's getting dialed in on a PXG driver 3-wood. For those listening, you might hear a loud smack once in a while. It's the ball speed, all that increased ball speed coming off the face, the Gen 6. But we're here to talk to a guy that's playing some really good golf right now, coming off a T9 last week up at an elevated event. And the Travelers have been working on this for a while, and I'm pleased to be joined by Alex Smalley up there in Detroit. How you doing, man?
Hey, Travis. Thanks for having me on. Doing great.
Well, first off, congratulations last week. That had to be fun. T9 elevated event. You hit the ball extremely well. How's the game right now?
Yeah. It's anytime you play well, it feels great. To be able to do it in competition, it feels even better, and to be able to do it in a big event like that feels fantastic. So, yeah, very happy with the week. Hit it great. The days where I had really good scores, some of the putts went in, and Thursday and Sunday didn't quite fall, some of them, but I still played really well those 2 days. So yeah, game feels really good. Feels really good right now, so I'm looking forward to this week in Detroit.
It's interesting to hear you say it's nice when it comes together in a tournament, because there's a lot of people right now that are listening to this podcast and they're an amateur player, and one of the things that they struggle with is, man, I can do it on the range, but I'm having a hard time taking it out to the golf course. That's something that really is the same for every caliber of player, isn't it, Alex? Because there's times where you probably feel like, wow, I'm hitting it great, I'm making everything, and then it's like, man, it doesn't quite feel the same out here in the tournament and getting it to transfer out there. It's the case for professional golfers too, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the case for anyone that really plays golf. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but most of the time when we're on the range, we're not really going through our full pre-shot routine, and there's no consequences to a bad shot on the driving range, right? There's none of that added extra pressure, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to say that about going to the range and just hitting balls. So yeah, I mean, the driving range and the golf course are a little different in terms of the mental side of the game. But yeah, whenever you can transfer it well from the range to the golf course, it's one of those aha moments, right? It's the feeling that keeps all of us wanting to go back to the course the next day and keep. So yeah, I mean, I think everyone who's played the game long enough can attest to it, that I think everyone's kind of gone through that process before, where sometimes it just doesn't click the same that it did on the range, and then you have the opposite, where you could have a bad warm up and then go out on the golf course and hit it great and have a great round. So
yeah,
it's a pretty interesting dynamic for sure.
It is. You went to Duke. You're from Rochester, of course, where the PGA was.
I was born there. My family moved to North Carolina when I was 2. So
okay.
I'm basically from North Carolina, but yes, I was born in Rochester. Correct.
Yeah, born in Rochester, and went to Duke, and turned pro in 2019. Your journey, you went Korn Ferry Tour into a little Canadian tour, and then off to the PGA Tour. But I got to ask you, you're 26. What's it like being a professional golfer right now in today's professional landscape and everything that is going on between the PGA Tour, LIV, PIF, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? There's so many things happening right now. What is it like being in your shoes? 26, professional golf, PGA Tour, all this, let's face it, chaos happening around you,
Yeah.
The unknown.
Yeah, right. I'll just kind of go back to the little intro you did. I did Q School right out of college, and I didn't get through Korn Ferry Q School. Then I had PGA Tour Canada, and then COVID hit. and was kind of on PGA Tour Canada for a couple years. Got a couple starts in the 2020-2021 season.
Yeah, 4
Played
events.
well, made it to the Corn Ferry Finals, got my card that way. So I
Yep.
never went Corn Ferry to Canada to PGA. I kind of went like Canada to Corn Ferry Finals and then to PGA. But anyways, it's certainly been an interesting first 2 years out here on tour with obviously Live Golf coming into the spotlight last year, and then some of the player meetings we had around that. And then with this whole new framework agreement that the tour announced with the PIF. I think there's still a lot that people don't know, and I'm one of those people as well. A lot of the players, and just a lot of the people that work for the PGA Tour in general. I don't think we have a good understanding of what the agreement actually looks like yet. From the player meeting that I was at, I wasn't able to go to the one in Canada because I got in late. But I went to the meeting at the Travelers, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions. They still have to hash out and negotiate a lot of the things for what this new agreement's going to look like. So it's yet to be seen what it's going to look like, and obviously the regulatory bodies are looking into the deal to begin with. So there's still questions about whether it's even going to exist in the next coming year. So yeah, certainly a lot of talk about,
but not a lot of answers.
A lot of talk, but not a lot of answers about what's going on off of the golf course. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of things to talk about out here.
How close do you follow it? Are you a player that, like, you want to know the details as they come about? I mean, I think there was a policy board meeting earlier in the week. Are you someone that wants to know, like, hey, what happened in the meeting? Where are we at? Really invested in how this thing is going to shake out, or are you kind of an arm's length and okay, when it happens, it happens. I'm just going to focus on my game, and it is what it is.
I think now this is just me, but to a certain point, I feel like anyone who plays on the PGA Tour or is associated with it should be interested in the details of it. So I recognize that there was a policy board meeting yesterday, and I think or a couple of days ago, and I think the PAC met as well. The Player Advisory Council met as well. I didn't read the whole, players, we got an email about, there was a PAC meeting, this is what we discussed.
Okay.
I didn't go through the whole thing word by word. But I think it is important to keep up on it. I'm not
you're not getting emotional and pissed off, I can't believe this and that. I mean, I'm sure there had to be some sticker shock, I'm sure, up front when everybody found out and like, what in the world is going on? How do we not know? I mean, naturally, but I know some players are probably more invested in this, and it's easy to get wrapped up into it and emotional about it. And pretty soon, it's going to affect you, obviously, as a player. And without, without knowing what's the details within the frame structure, I'm sure for some that has to be hard to understand, right? Like, how do we not know, like, exactly what this is going to look and feel like as a player on the PGA Tour? There's just naturally has to be some frustration there.
Yeah, certainly. I think again, I can't speak to what everyone feels like, sure. But I was certainly, shocked and kind of blindsided when the news first came out about this agreement that was going to take place. I was actually sitting on the tarmac about to take off, going to Canada when I got the notification that this agreement was coming out. So it certainly was quite the shock, and I think it was. I think anyone can certainly feel a little bit, when no one knows it's coming, when no one knows about it, you certainly feel a little bit betrayed, right off the gun, right off the bat, just emotionally, right? Because, you weren't part of the you weren't part of the deal. You weren't in on the details. So there was certain, I can, like I said, I wasn't at the player meeting in Canada. I saw some of the reports that came out of the meeting that it was pretty fiery. So I can't speak to what that meeting was like, but I can certainly understand if the meeting was hostile with how I felt that afternoon when the news came out. And I think it's, pretty normal for anyone to feel that way with, certainly some of the comments that were, being floated around last year when Liv was first taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's almost like a complete 180-degree turn happened. So, that was a little confusing and hard to understand. But yet again, I'm not the commissioner of a PGA Tour, with who knows how many partners and billions of dollars and thousands of employees. So I certainly don't want to be in that position that Mr. Monahan was, to have to, decide the future for the PGA Tour for that many employees and title sponsors. And
well, speaking of Jay, he took some time away for health reasons, and it sounds like he's doing pretty well. Has anybody heard from him out there? Any update on how the commissioner's doing?
Yeah, so that came up only for a couple of minutes at the player meeting at the Travelers. The update was that there really wasn't an update about his health. We certainly all wish him the very best in his recovery, and hopefully it's nothing too serious, and hopefully he'll be back out here very soon. But what was said was that the family is keeping it very private.
Yeah.
And that there wasn't any more information that was to be released about it. So we're all hoping to see him out here very, very soon, and hope that everything is okay.
Let's move it to the golf here. So Detroit Country Club, this is a place that has yielded some birdies over the years. You're coming off a place last week where I believe 23 under won it with Keegan last week. And we've seen at Detroit CC get well into the 20s as well. Give us an update here on the golf course. I understand they had some storms, could be pretty soft. What are you anticipating this week? You got to get it to 23 at least, or we got to go well beyond that?
Yes. So they had a decent line of storms roll through either Sunday or Monday. I think it was Sunday, and there are a number of trees that fell down. One fell on the fringes of the practice putting green. So there are a couple spots on the putting green where the tree fell that you can notice the damage a little bit. Golf course is very receptive. Greens are very soft. They're not very fast at all right now. If I had to estimate, the greens are only rolling at about a 10 or a 10.5 on the stimp right now. That'll probably change come tomorrow when the first round gets underway. But yes, very receptive. Fairways aren't rolling out, so if your ball hits in the fairway, it's most likely going to stay in the fairway. Off the tee, the rough isn't very penal at all. There's not a whole lot of rough, so even if you do miss a fairway, it's not like you're going to have to chip out sideways if you're in the rough. It's still very gettable if you can get into the rough. And with how receptive the greens are, the one challenge to that is that the golf course, some of the holes aren't super long, so you do have a lot of wedges into the greens. So I think one thing that's going to be paramount this week is controlling your spin with your wedges. Mm-hmm. And I think the guy that can do that the best is going to fare very well. And obviously with the Poana greens here, when they are soft, late afternoon, it can get a little dicey. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I guess we'll have to see if that affects play at all. But yeah, I read Tony Finau's comment yesterday that, he could see 30 under winning this week. And the par fives are very gettable. And like I said, it's playing pretty receptive right now. So mm-hmm. I don't think, that's out of the question whether someone shoots 30 under or not. If they shoot 30 under, they deserve to win on any golf course. But
You like
whether
that? You like
or not,
you like going? You like tournaments where you have to go low like this, where you have to? I mean, it's throttled down, right? I mean, you're kind of going to one tee and thinking, all right, I gotta, okay, if I get to 30 under, I mean, I've got to make, I got to go 5, 6, 700 a day, right? I mean, that's kind of the mindset. So this is different, right? This week where you got to go, you got to make birdies versus say a PGA Championship, an Arnold Palmer Invitational, where the course is set up much more penalizing, and in your mind, all right, this what's going to win this tournament is 10, 11, 12, 13 under.
sure.
Totally different mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we had a little bit of that mindset last week at TPC River Highlands. Like you mentioned, Keegan, I think, was 23 under, and there were a few other guys that were in the 20s. So we kind of had that mindset of, you have to keep the gas pedal down at all times last week as well. It was funny. I was talking with another player a couple days ago, and we were just talking about how before last week, how the last couple of months have just kind of beaten everybody up, from essentially, Quail Hollow. It's a big golf course, big championship golf course. I think Wyndham, I can't remember exactly what he won at, but it was 15, 16, 17 under, I think.
Yeah.
But scores weren't super low, outside of the top three guys there. Then obviously the PGA Championship, that was a tough course. Colonial, the scores weren't low at all at Colonial because they were about to tear it up, to redesign it, to redo it. So the scores were a little on the higher side there. Then the next week you go to Memorial, and that's a really tricky golf course. And then you go to Canada, and Canada, the rough was very healthy, and it was soft, but that was another course where it kind of beat some people up. It certainly, if you weren't driving it well, it could beat you up a little bit. And then I wasn't at the U.S. Open, but obviously to U.S. Open, so it's both physically and mentally demanding. So we've had a couple of months where we've had a lot of golf courses where the scores haven't been that low at all, and then I guess like you mentioned, coming off last week and then this week as well, scores are going to be lower, and so that mindset does shift a little bit of where you can be a little more aggressive at times. So yeah. I do think that there is a little change, a little change there that can kind of get you rolling.
Yeah, it's a different mindset. I think there's a good balance in the tour. I really do. I think there's courses, we've had 2 into the 20s. I was looking here at my notes, Century, and then the Travelers this week. I'm sure will be into the 20s, but you have a lot of those, mid-teens, and then you start getting down into the low, 10, 11, 12, and then single digits. So, there it's a nice mix. It really is. And look, I don't mind, some guys, they kind of speak out. Rory kind of talked about how he felt like maybe TPC River Highlands is obsolete and this and that. Look, I like to see some birdies from time to time. And when you get, especially after the U.S. Open, right? It's kind of like, okay, I've had the U.S. Open, it's tough, and now I come out of that and I can make some birdies. Let's take a look at your swing here. I know you work with David Orr, and one of the things that people like here on the podcast is when we look at the swing. You and I were chatting, or you kind of talked about how you're kind of more of a feel player, right? And David is more of kind of a putting guru who does dabble in the swing a little bit, but your guys' relationship started with putting and then kind of evolved into the full swing somehow. Tell us how that worked.
Yeah, that's correct. So I graduated from college in 2019, and we were just kind of looking up coaches online, because I hadn't really ever worked with a coach full time. I mean, growing up, I took lessons from the head pro at my golf course, but once I got to a certain level, I guess, he told me that I would have to go, elsewhere if I wanted a little bit more instruction. And I never really had a coach in college either. My college coaches at Duke certainly, they would look at my, would give me some suggestions of what they saw. But yeah, I found David when I graduated college. Like you mentioned, the putting guru. So I went to go see him for putting, and it was funny. He told me one of our first lessons that he would never do full swing with me at all, because he figured out I was a field player. I'm not very technical or mechanical at all. So, but it was, one day I just kind of asked him, hey, can you, just look at it and give me some pointers, kind of point me in the right direction, about what I can improve on or get better on in the full swing. And so he did, and we worked on a couple of things and it got better. And so yeah, I've been working with him for about 4 years now. Full swing, it's probably only been a year and a half or 2 years maybe. But yeah, he worked with Justin Rose for a long time. He was on Justin's team when he won the U.S. Open at Marion. So yeah, so he was actually just up in Detroit this week. Worked with him yesterday, and so yeah, we've been working on a couple little things. And
take us through it here. Here's your swing. Here's your swing here from target line. What are a couple of your key things here? Is what we're looking at.
Yeah. So what we started working on, I think it was actually at the Wells Fargo. I tend to drive my hands through the ball a lot through impact. So I don't release the club a whole lot through impact. I tend to kind of drive the handle forward a little bit.
Okay.
And so I don't hit it super high. And so in order to kind of get the overtaking rate of the club a little quicker, so I don't drive it as far forward, is that, and people probably noticed it with a little pause in my backswing. So when I get to the top of my backswing and kind of feel like a little pause, or kind of like a little Cameron Young kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting.
I start the transition into my left foot. So I feel like I have a little more pressure on my left foot. Once the club kind of gathers at the top, I start to shift the weight towards my left foot, and that kind of helps me not drive the club, drive the handle of the club forward as much at impact. It the shaft lines up a little bit better with my left arm, and obviously it my divots aren't as long. I could be a little shallower, I guess. And I've really my ball striking I've really seen an improvement, once we started doing that at Quail Hollow. And I think that's when things kind of, started turning around for me a little bit. So that's one of the main things we've been working on, is just trying to, gather the club at the top, and then, start that weight transition into the middle part of my left foot.
When you say gather, like right here, it almost like comes to it almost kind of comes to a complete stop, where maybe there's not this runoff in the arms or this excessive wrist cock, where it's more stable in the wrists and the arms, and then you start down.
Sure. Yeah. And so, and one of my other keys is that I try to feel like, the butt of the club and the buttons on my shirt are in sync, kind of in sync going back, and then, relatively in sync coming down on the full, on the follow through. So yeah, I mean that, that's really helped me a lot, ever since Quail Hollow. And like I said, I've noticed a difference, and it's been a good key for me the last couple of months.
You're someone who, really kind of stays right on top of it, right? Like you look at that turn and you're very centered, your head's not moving off the ball in transition. You're right there. I mean, your head is very centered. You stay right there on top of it as you turn through. And so when you counter that with shaft lane, like that's a high caliber skill player. For my audience that's listening, is, there's not a lot of side to side movement there in the head. It's very centered, shaft forward, rotating through. This guy's compressing the golf ball. And if I hear you right, like you're trying to kind of decompress that shaft lean just a little bit, maybe let a little bit more out where you can launch the ball just a bit more up in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it certainly helped my fairway bunker shots as well.
Yeah.
Not, you know, because if fairway bunker shots, you want to take as little sand as possible if you have a good lie or even a bad lie. You don't really want to move a whole lot of sand. And with a lot of forward shaft lean, that can be tricky for me sometimes. And so, like I mentioned, when we started, working on this a little bit at Quail Hollow, I've noticed that my fairway bunker shots have gotten a little bit better.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's shown up in multiple parts of the game. It's not just off the tee or irons. It's helped my fairway bunker shots as well. Because again, you want to be quiet with the legs. You don't want to be jumping around a whole lot in the bunkers because the ground's unstable. So you want to be relatively stable through the ground. So yeah, it's helped tremendously in that aspect.
Strokes gain approach right now 55th. Strokes gain off the tee 43rd. Those are, that's very efficient. Strokes gain tee to green, and it's a look. If you can strike the ball like that, you're going to be giving yourself a lot of opportunities, and that travels, of course, all over the world when you can do those things. I want to go to your driver real quick, and when you look at your swing from this view, and you look at the club at the top, has your swing, which is obviously beautiful and fantastic, has it looked like this, say, for the last 7 years, from your end of high school days through college, through professional, or has it changed visually, let's say, from this view?
I would say, my mom likes taking videos of my driver swings before rounds. So this was actually last week at the Travelers when she took this, and she might not be lined up perfectly from where my target was. She doesn't know where I was trying to hit it, but this was one of the better ones that I could find. So I would say, like, tempo wise, my tempo's always been kind of like this. It's funny. David was asking my coach, David was asking for videos of my swing when I was in college or in high school, just to see what it was like compared to what it is now. And my backswing has changed a little bit. I've been, you can see I'm a little laid off, and I've been a little laid off for the past couple of years.
When David, the camera angle's not doing that justice, though. That it's slightly, but the camera angle kind of skews it a little bit. But yeah, but it's a little. You're saying, to your point, so just a little bit more over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's been. I don't look at swing videos a whole lot either. I don't take a whole lot of swing videos. But we found some when I was in high school and college, and I wasn't that laid off. But my backswing, in high school and college might have been a little longer. It might have, the club head might have dipped a little past parallel or past my head a little bit. And that's another one of the keys in my ball striking, is that if I can feel a little shorter on the backswing and a little more compressed, I tend to, when things start to go a little awry, it's maybe when I get a little too long and a little too laid off. But yeah, so David said he was looking at the videos, and he said my backswing's changed a little throughout the years, but my downswing really hasn't. It's kind of been in the same spot over the years. So yeah.
Protect the genius. Like, you don't have to change just to change, like that's it. And it seems simple, but it happens, at your level. And I always like asking that question, like, has it really changed that much? And yours, like, yeah, maybe a little, but not, like, and I like that. Like, it's like the DNA of your swing is still in there. And it's interesting when you said about that little pause. Like, I think I like instinctively knew that, like, watching you play. But now that I really watch your swing, like, it does have like a little Cameron Young to it, like that, that it's kind of gathered, and then I like it, and then back down. And so it's interesting, just how, like, rhythmic it is, right? And how that little, what feels like a pause at the top and the gathering. It's funny. It's so interesting that we're talking about this, because I talked about this very thing on the podcast on Monday, and how like completing your backswing and this and that. And no, actually, no, we shot it. It's going to run next Monday. My apologies. There's going to be, we talked about this. We've already shot it, but it's going to run next Monday. And this gathering of the turn to the top of the swing, because most people that are listening, Alex, and you see this in pro-ams, I'm sure, when they get quick with their arms, and their shoulder, and the left shoulder never makes it behind the ball. Like they just don't get the full turn. So when you give them like this image of Alex Smalley, of Cameron Young, of Hideki Matsuyama, like gather it and then go, and they feel like, wow, I feel more deliberate. Like I feel more deliberate going back, and I feel like I'm pausing. And then you show it to them, they're like, oh wow, that looks normal. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's David kind of has a saying, or when you're swinging well, it feels very slow and very rhythmic, and you're not thinking about a whole lot. But when you don't feel like you're well and you're not hitting it very well, everything seems sped up a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Because you maybe you're anticipating the strike a little bit, or you're anticipating the result a little bit. So yeah, I mean, certainly, maybe if a couple people, take something out of that, then that's great. But that kind of tempo and that kind of thing has worked for me for a decent time.
Yeah. Well, it's good stuff. It's clearly working. And, you look at your stats, and you get that putter going where the last 2 weeks, RBC, Canadian Open, you were positive 1.4 at the putter, and you finished 25th at the Travelers, just under positive 1, and you finished 9th. Strokes gained tee to green at the Travelers, positive 9.3. And so, it sounds like you see a couple more of those go in, and
yeah,
you're going to be really, really tracking. Your very popular bet this week. You ever pay attention to any of that stuff? Like, I have a lot of people that like to do fantasy and this and that, and they're like, "Hey, you got Alex come on the pod?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Oh man, I love him this week. This is going to be a good course for him, right?" Do you like this course? Is this like a good course for you?
Yeah, it's a good old school golf course. If I'm not mistaken, it's a Donald Ross course, I think, maybe. And growing up in North Carolina, we get a lot of Donald Ross courses. I've played Pinehurst quite a bit, and that's probably my favorite course I've played. Is Pinehurst number 2.
Wow.
I'm a member at Sedgefield, so that's Donald Ross right there. So I'm very familiar with, the slopey greens and the runoffs and that type of stuff. But it's Detroit. It's a very, old school golf course. The holes run parallel to each other. They're right next to each other. Big hardwood trees all around. The trees frame the holes. So yeah, I mean, I grew up on a tree line golf course, so I feel comfortable here. It's just, a matter of, doing the same thing that I did last week, and just putting everything together, and, just kind of letting it happen.
Well, I think you got the right attitude, man. Just kind of block out the noise, all the other stuff. It'll work itself out. Like there's a lot of things you can't control, right, in this world. And I've just kind of taken the attitude that if I can't control it. So it's like, why, I can have an opinion, and sure, there'll be some emotions one way or the other, but I got to get too worked up, right? You can't get too worked up on what's happening over there. You just take care of you, and you go out and you play, and you hit it like you do, and you make some putts, man. There's going to be plenty of money to go around. I think there's, with from what I've seen in the last couple of years, there's going to be plenty of that going around. Alex, you're great, man. I appreciate it. Really appreciate the time. Best of luck this week. When you get that first win on the PGA Tour, promise you'll come back and you talk to us again.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. All right. Best of luck this week.
Yeah. Thanks, Travis. Thank you.